I'd love to start with this. You wrote a letter to Dr. Phil, and that was like the beginning of your sobriety journey, correct? So talk about why you did that, what was going on in your life at the time, and how that all came to fruition.
I wrote the letter 12 years ago, and it was another night of chaos in my house. And what that looks like is like just a screaming match. I lived with my parents. I was 25 years old living with my parents. Just had a screaming match with them. I was getting loaded with my sisters, and I was sitting in my room. I couldn't even shut the door in my room because my dad took the doorknobs off. That's how bad it was. Couldn't trust me. And it was, that party for one with drugs and alcohol. My dad was obsessed with Dr. Phil, and he would always have him on the TV or leave newspaper articles cut out on the kitchen table of him. One night I was like, let me just write this letter because here, me and my sisters getting loaded, we didn't look like your typical like drug addict. So I wrote a letter and sent a picture of me and my sisters and just told my truth and what it looked like, my life in that moment, and then just expected to never, ever hear from them ever again. And it wasn't until 2 years later, Doug, that the producers of Dr. Phil called me and wanted to do a show on addiction and basically was like, hey, like, we just saw your letter. Are you guys still getting high? Are you still a piece of shit? And I was like, yeah, we still are. So that's when everything took off, and that's how I got sober, going on the show, pure chaos.
Wow. So what was it about going on the show that made you get sober? Like what happened?
Basically, what it looked like, me and my sisters, I don't come from money. We were all getting high. So it was just one of us going into a 7-day detox, 14-day like scholarship in a treatment center out in Jersey. And one of us would get out and the other one would be getting high. And like at that point, we were doing that for, I mean, probably like 5, 6 years between all of us, nonstop in and out of jail, getting arrested. And by that point, I wanted the help, but I didn't have the funds to get help. I didn't have insurance. I just didn't know what to do in that moment. And I felt like I physically needed to be separated from the drug and the drink and away from, my sisters and my family. And I mean, I thought at the time to get out of Jersey. So that I knew going on the show that we would get help. I was not thinking about, the backlash of all that, of millions of people seeing me and my sisters get loaded. I was not thinking about that. I just knew that we would all be able to go to treatment, period.
I think I saw a TikTok that you had done where you described what it was like. And you said one of the things that you didn't expect to happen, which is what you kind of alluded to, was that like they brought your parents, I think, out first, right? And Dr. Phil was talking to your parents. And then they play like the highlight reel of you doing drugs, right? Which, you weren't really expecting that to happen. And then the world obviously saw all that as well. What was your relationship like with your parents when you got on the show? Like, how did you convince them to come on the show with you?
They were pretty broken too. Like I said, in our house, it was just insanity because literally it showed us no parents should ever have to see their kids shooting heroin, and that's typically not something that people do see. If your kid is doing it right and they go get help and they go to treatment, they get help, blah blah blah, but you never usually witness it. So when we walked onto the set and behind in the big screen showing, us getting high, and then also showing like our get down of like how we got money and those things that I promised myself that I would never do, and like showing all that in that moment, it was like absolutely crazy. I don't think that they fully understood what was going to happen as well. I think that they also were just thinking, oh, hey, they're going to get help. And I also don't think that they knew how bad it truly was, but it was pretty like convincing. I think like when I got the voicemail from the producers, it was just like, hey, listen, we got this, voicemail. They want to do a show on addiction next week. We should just do it. We will all get help, mom and dad. You know what I mean? We're all going to get the help that we need. I don't think it wasn't until like they had a camera guy come out to Jersey and film us and, you know, do our private interviews that they fully realize like, whoa, this is like real life. This is happening. This is, this is going to be shown for like millions of people. And then it wasn't until like we were on the actual set and they're sitting in their chairs seeing their little girls, getting high and then hearing the audience like boo us and stuff that it fully sunk in. And I know that we got to walk off that stage and go to treatment. They got to walk off that stage and go back into that little hometown, that little town that I'm from, where everybody saw that show and had to, just like face that. They didn't have, we're all up, like I was out in California, my little sister was too. My older sister got sent to Texas. So, and we're in treatment and like we're getting the help they need. They had to fully like deal with that. And it wasn't until probably a couple years after that they fully were like accepting of it, okay, and could fully like just walk out in public and not be like ashamed anymore of that. But I mean, I don't think none of us realized what we were about to walk into.
And so your sister's sober now too?
So they aren't sober, but they're doing well. So they don't do what I do, but they're doing good. But they definitely had moments, both of them have had some major setbacks in the last 10 years.
Gotcha. Well, we don't have to dive into that. I mean, I was just curious to see like where they were at now compared to you. So they've sent camera crews to like film you guys getting high. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so they just sent one guy out. His name was Steve. We became like friends with him. He was super cool. They just sent him out to just follow us around for 2 days of our normal get down of getting loaded. What that looked like was, like just waking up, figuring out how to get money, going to get the drugs, getting high, figuring out how to get more money. And it wasn't always like that. Pretty much how it started was I met the love of my life and I started partying a lot more and I worked in a pharmacy. I ended up starting to do drugs and I was in charge of all the inventory because I mean, us alcoholic addicts are very smart people, and trustworthy with before. And I was in charge of the inventory. So my get down was I was stealing from the pharmacy. That's what it started with the pills. And then eventually led to the heroin. All the things I didn't want to do.
So you weren't like partying, like drinking a bunch, like in high school or anything in college. It was just more you met a guy and then you guys started partying with pills and then you working at the pharmacy was the catalyst for that?
I had to do a lot of work, and because like I used to drink a lot in high school, but it wasn't anything out of control. And people, you'll talk to people that like, oh, they had their first drink and it was like, like magic, and like they felt comfortable, but that's not my story. I would drink and I was always the last chick hanging with all the guys drinking, but I just felt like it wasn't fully, anything I was in love with. But at this point, my sisters were both already getting high though. They were both doing drugs and they kind of had a good relationship. And me, I kind of resented them. I said I never wanted to be like them, right? Like they were already doing drugs. I thought it was like disgusting. I would never do that. I graduated high school, top of the class, popular, played sports, had a lot of friends. So after I graduated is when I met this guy and started partying more and started to, do drugs. And that's where I fell in love pretty much with the drugs as well. And one day woke up, realized that I needed them. I couldn't go without them.
A lot of times you hear stories like you're describing where the kid is troubled in high school. They're bullied, like broken home, wasn't good at sports, like low self-esteem, didn't fit in, wasn't good academically. And that was the reason for people using drugs to like numb a lot of the pain from that. But you were the total opposite. You said top of your class, star athlete, very well liked, super popular. What do you think, like looking back now, like what do you think it was that where you went from essentially like the perfect child to being hooked on painkillers?
I mean, I feel like nothing was ever enough. And for the longest time, like I said, I didn't come from money. Like my parents, like, worked very hard. We had mostly everything that we, needed and some of what we wanted, but it was just never enough. And I constantly compared myself to everybody. And I just feel I was just chasing something for so long, you know what I mean? And just wanting something to fix me. The inside, I didn't know what it was. So when I found the drugs and, was able to fully kind of like check out, it just felt like good. And then I was very good at hiding it for a long time. And, obviously looking down on my sisters because they were doing things worse than me because this wasn't who I was supposed to be. I wasn't supposed to be a drug addict, I never expected this. Nobody just wants to be a drug addict. So I feel like I was just, still to this day, like, no, it wasn't enough. Nothing was ever enough.
And I think like parents gauge like the success of their kid and how they're doing based on like grades and based on like maybe how they're doing in sports. And they say like, oh, if my child is excelling in school, they're doing great at sports, they're showing up to practice, they're like, well liked and doing well, they're probably not doing anything like crazy, right? And so it can definitely, like you said, be a great way to mask and hide from, some of the stuff that you're doing behind the scenes. Do you think you became like addicted to like achievement, and given that you had so much success academically and athletically, that there was nowhere to go from there, and that once you stopped doing that, you had to, do something like drugs to fill that void?
Yeah. And I also feel like now looking back, it was all these expectations that I put on myself. I don't know about you, but I still struggle to this day with, I'm a perfectionist, and yeah, it was just all of like my own making in my head. And that's why, even to this day, that's why I still do all these things. 10 years sober, I still do all these things because I still am unwell in my head. My head still likes to tell me to this day that I'm a piece of shit, and I know that it's not reality. It's just such a good reminder to even be talking about it right now, to just remember what I'm capable of, and not the good things, the bad things of what I'm capable of. I used to steal, lie, cheat. I did some really awful things, and just knowing that tomorrow I could go right back to that spot.
What do you think's at the root of this, like the negative frame of mind you still have, being somebody, you're 10 years sober. I think I saw you and your sisters went back on Dr. Phil, right?
We've been back on, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You and your husband have started a successful business and doing well financially. You're living in Orange County. Like, despite that 10, being out of the mud, if you will, for 10 years, why do you still see yourself as a piece of crap? In your words, not mine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Because it's just, I have this, this sickness, this like mind, that just like likes to trick me into that. And knowing, and that's why like I need that reminder that I am not like, I am a good person. It's just like the little things to just remember and help other people out. I feel like, I just I don't have, the drink or the drug to go to anymore. And I don't get to just, life is in session. That's why I also I have two little kids, sometimes, I could say, oh, you're not, you're not a good mom, or you're not a good wife. And I mean, I don't fully know like why my head likes to trick me and tell me like those things, but the good news is that today like I have a solution, and I know that it's not reality, right? Like I'm able to catch myself and know that that's not real.
And I definitely want to dive more into, what you've done in the last 10 years to, heal and grow, and what you do on a regular basis to stay in recovery, given like these negative thoughts that you still have consistently. But I want to kind of go back to, the story, and I'd love to know like, what was the process like of, you start dating a guy, you're working at a pharmacy, you start stealing pills, to then like you were, in dire straits, like shooting heroin with your sisters. What did that progression look like?
Yeah, so like it wasn't just like overnight, but yeah, what ended up happening is when I worked in that pharmacy, life was still manageable. Things still looked good on the outside. to everybody, friends, and my parents as well. Their focus was kind of on my sisters because, like I said, they were already, doing drugs and already been to treatment at that point. But I was going to like community college. I got a new car. Like I said, had the boyfriend, started partying, all that stuff. What ended up happening was when I was 22 years old, I remember walking into work one day and walked to the pharmacy. I went to the time clock and I saw the managers standing there. And at that point, I was like, oh my God, like I knew that I was caught. And it wasn't like, oh, I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I knew I made this awful mistake. Like my only thought process in that moment was, how am I going to get high today? And that day, I did not walk out of there in handcuffs. Like, I don't even know. Thank God I didn't. But I walked out of there, and that is the first day that I shot heroin. And that's like from that moment, like I think I got scared at one point. I shot heroin for 2 weeks after I got fired from that job. And I remember saying, I think that I need to go to treatment. But at that point, I was only going to treatment because I was scared about like legal stuff with getting fired from there, all that stuff. So it wasn't because I wanted to or thought I had a problem. So that's when I first went into treatment when I was 22. And I went into treatment and compared myself to everybody because there was a lot of not yets. I just heard so many stories in there that I was like, this isn't me. And I thought that I just needed to detox real quick. So I was able to go to treatment. I think I lasted like 15 days in there and then got out, got high right away, getting out of treatment. And then after I got out of treatment, I was like, oh my God, I think New Jersey is the problem. That's what I thought. So I was like, let me go to Florida. Because at that point, my older sister was in Florida in a treatment center. So I went to Florida and my dad helped us get an apartment and we had a couch and 2 beds in that apartment, me and my sister. And within 2 months, we sold everything in that apartment and we were sleeping on an air mattress, me and my sister, that had a hole in it. So we would wake up in the morning and it would be like on the ground. And me and my sister were getting high together. And like I said, we didn't have a great relationship, but in that moment, that's how we bonded. We started to get high together. And then I was like, whoa, my sister's crazy. She's the problem. So let me go back to Jersey and get out of Florida. I had this victim mentality. It was always everybody else's fault. Like I said, if I grew up with money, then this wouldn't be my life. And all these, if my parents didn't do this and da da da, it was everybody else's fault. Now I'm back in Jersey getting high. My little sister's back in Jersey, and now we're getting high together. And what ultimately ended up was my older sister came back to Jersey. Now all 3 of us are getting high together. And then that's when things got really like chaotic. I was robbing houses. I was getting arrested constantly. I was, just sleeping with men to, get money and fighting with my parents. I'm talking like, Doug, I'm looking at my mom in her eyes, holding her purse, saying, give me the damn purse because I needed to get money. I'm talking my dad finding, you know what I mean? Finding bags of, drugs. Like he's going through our trash to like find. And my first thought is to say, ew, you went through the trash? He's literally just found drugs. But that insanity, like just screaming, fighting, chaos, and then in and out of jail with me and my sisters. And you couldn't do anything because everything interfered with my drug use. And, like we couldn't do anything as a family anymore. I was trying to get a job just to get money to get high. Like it was just insane. So that was my life and that was my family's life. And that became normal to us. We knew it wasn't normal, but it was just how we functioned every single day. So then ultimately that led me to write that letter because of all the chaos and just how bad it was and how sick I was. And I needed to get high. Nothing else mattered to me at all.
Wow. Thanks for sharing all that. That's wild. Like, what a story. I mean, I think it's mind boggling to a lot of people, but, I think the people who have struggled with addiction, like, no matter how severe it was, it makes sense, right? Because you do whatever you do to get high. I mean, it's like a crazy, like, religion, right? Like, you do all day, every day, all you think about is how you're going to get money to score drugs and how you're going to get more money to score drugs, who you're going to scheme, who you're going to con, who you're going to lie to in order to get that thing. And obviously, based on your story, it got probably the things you did, it seems like, maybe were a bit more severe than maybe, the average person, but it's still always like you were like, demanding that your mom give you her purse. Like when you said you were robbing homes, were you going in like with a gun and like robbing people at gunpoint, or what do you mean?
I still had a car that I couldn't roll the window down because that was like broken. I had to jump the car like every single day, so I couldn't turn it off when I stopped, but I had a car. You become friends with the weirdest, craziest people when you're getting loaded, and just would drive those people around. They would go in, get high. I would obviously, we would just go to the pawn shop, didn't have to use the ID, nothing, and just boom, like that, just like chaos. So I would get money like that way. So just, yeah, like things that I was just like, whoa, how did a student, popular, like high school, like become this, So that's what I was doing. Also going into Walmart, just stealing stuff and then going back to return it to get money back, and somehow getting a gift card, taking it in to like sell to somebody for half to get half of the money from that. Taking, I all my DVDs, all the Disney DVDs my parents had, got like $1 from the pawn shop for each of those. And oh my God, I stole all like my grandparents' jewelry, anything my mom had. The thing, it just like anything to get money. And I'm talking like paying for gas, like with pennies and nickels, Doug. Like now I see change, like a quarter, like, oh, my here, like some give it to my son. Like before, that quarter was everything to me. I needed that quarter to get gas, to get where I needed to go, or just to get cigarettes.
And so you end up, writing this letter to Dr. Phil, you get on the show, you're there. And then what's the process like from leaving the show to getting sober?
So as soon as like walking off that set, I got right into a limo and they sent me to the treatment center out in Orange County. And it was an all women's treatment center. I don't know how they picked where each of us went, but walked right into treatment right after that. I went to detox and then went into treatment. And then that's kind of like where the journey began, because, treatment introduced me to a 12-step program. And then that's like where the work started. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just knew that I didn't want to feel how I was feeling anymore. I was like gifted this great opportunity, scholarship now to this treatment center in California. Let me just do this. And I got sent to this bougie treatment center where they had a chef. Like it was super nice. And because when I tell you I was going to like quick detoxes and treatment centers in Jersey, it was like cockroaches crawling on the ground, like out there, like this was way different. And I was 25 years old and I was in there with a bunch of 18-year-olds and just young girls that were just sent there. I just fully started to put in the work at that moment. That's like where my journey began. I got like a get well job out here at a recovery store that I still work at to this day. I got like a sponsor and started working STEP. I had to deal with a lot of legal stuff. I lived in a lot of fear with that and financially, and it was just a lot of work that I didn't expect that I was going to do, but I just continued to do it. And then, yeah, life started to get really good, right? But it was basically a lot of work that I had to do. And like the program that I do, a lot of people, they even say it like, it's not for people who want it. It's like for people who actually do the work.
When did you realize that you were the problem?
I realized that I was the problem. I knew that last year that I was getting high I fully knew because of how I started to act and speak, and everything that would come out of my mouth was a lie. I knew that I was the problem. And then it wasn't until I fully surrendered that when I first got sober and fully took a look at myself, all these things that I have done to cause all these other issues, that I was the problem. And the drinking and the drugs were just the solution to my problem. Because I realized when I got sober that when I didn't have the drugs or the drink anymore and I was still Amanda and still crazy and all these thoughts were happening, I was like, whoa, I have been the problem the whole time. I've just been fighting against myself, me versus me, my whole life.
What was early sobriety and recovery like for you? What were some of the hardest things, and what helped you like stay sober and control a lot of the negative thoughts that you've said you've had over the years?
The hardest thing was I was in treatment, I was in sober living, with all these young girls, and I'm 25 years old, like starting completely over. At that point, I thought at 25, I would have this career, this family, all these things. Me accepting that this is where I'm at, right? I didn't have a license, so I didn't have a car. I didn't have anything. Like early sobriety looked like me getting up, going to work, going to a meeting, eating dinner, sleeping in a twin size bed, peeing in a cup every other day for somebody, right? And having a curfew at 9 p.m. It was very humbling. Early sobriety was terrifying. Like I said, a lot of legal stuff I had to deal with and a lot of financial insecurities. I just didn't even know how to live. Early sobriety was difficult. And then I remember I had 4 months sober and I just got done working all day and I went to a meeting and I'm laying in my bed. It's 9 p.m. I was miserable because all these things that I had to do that day, right? And I had this moment where I didn't think about getting high that day. And that right there, like that was a miracle for me because it was my job. I was a slave to drugs and alcohol. It was all I thought about 24/7. In that moment, I'll never forget when I just realized, oh my God, there's a bigger life out there, and that I don't have to live like that anymore. Then I just put in a lot of work so I can like remain in the present. It's a lot of doing things that I don't want to do. Speak up to a lot of people. I help a lot of other women out. I go to these meetings still. I do a lot of things that I don't want to do to this day to help be the best version of myself and to live in the solution ultimately and not have to live in that dark mindset.
Other than stopping drugs and alcohol, what were some of the other like adjustments you had to make in your life that have kept you in recovery for so long?
Friends, you know what I mean? Just everything. My whole life pretty much, changed. It looks like way different of things of like what I do every single day. Because when you're doing drugs and alcohol, that's all I thought about. You hang out with weird people, you do really weird things, and like now it just trips me out to think about how much my life has changed. I work in a recovery store. I would have never thought that. You know what I mean? Like that.
What's a recovery store?
They sell a lot of medallions, recovery books, self-help, healing. It's a lot of like self-help, inspirational like gifts pretty much at that store. So I work there. I do their social media. She hired me at 80 something days sober. I was a felon. How am I ever going to get a job? What am I going to do? And she just fully like knew my story, hired me. And yeah, it helps a lot of people. She hires people newly in recovery. So she helps a lot of people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then how did the going back on Dr. Phil come along?
I've been back on the show 3 times actually because one pair of sisters, twins, their parents wrote in because they saw our episode, me and my sister's episode. So I went back on the show and got to speak to them, the twin girls. Went back on the show again when they did a show about addiction and like an update. And then went back on the show again when it's like a whole thing that people were trying to say that Dr. Phil and his production team would feed the people that would go on there for addiction, drugs and alcohol. Like I told you, the camera guy that came out to follow us around, we like begged him for money and like he would not give us money. Dr. Phil didn't give us, when we went on the show, they checked our suitcases and stuff for drugs. There was no alcohol in there. So we went back on the show to talk about that as well. And also just to like talk to like other addicts because we're a success story. We're still doing well. We're still alive. Today, it's sad and the reality of fentanyls and everything, and people are just dying nonstop. So for me and my sisters to all still be here, it's just a miracle in itself.
Yeah, it is a miracle. Congratulations on everything that you've accomplished and overcome. What have been like some of the big like habits from a lifestyle perspective that have helped you kind of, reinvent yourself and transform your life?
I would feel like a lot of, daily meditation, exercise, a lot of fellowship, super hard, with my friends and like-minded people. I am connected with a very strong group of sober moms. It's super important, and just working and helping others. That's like a big part of my purpose. I feel like I got to go through this and live all of that. And my purpose today is to just, if I can just help one other person out to show them that they can do it, because I've been in that dark spot, and it was painful and I thought that I was never going to make it out. So just to be like that hope that you can do it too. Like you said, like my life today and where I live and how I live, this isn't a life that I thought that a girl like me could ever have. But here I am living it.
That's wild. And I think it's really cool that you work out and you have that like mind body connection, that also you have a good group of people you surround yourself with. I think that's incredibly important. You talked about like a lot of the stuff that you did before you got sober and, how tough it's been to kind of reconcile with all that between the stuff you did, with your parents and your family and the getting high and everything. What's been the hardest thing for you to kind of forgive yourself for? I mean, given the fact that it seems like you still hold on to a lot of that based on how you see yourself.
I think it would be like, for like what I put like everyone through, because when I was in it, I just thought that it was just like, leave me alone. This is like my life and like it doesn't affect you. But really, alcoholism and addiction, it's a family disease, right? It affects everyone around us. And for everything that I put like my family through, but I'll tell you what, today, like me and my family, we talk about it, and my parents, like it was the best thing that could have happened to them. And I know if I didn't go through all that stuff, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. Like all these little moments in my life, like I would have never met, my husband. I would have never had these kids. I would have never, all these like little things, right? So I have let go a lot of that. I feel like what it is now, saying it out loud to you, and is that I just don't ever forget it, right? And I shouldn't be living in those like negative thoughts, right? It's just hard sometimes because I know all the right answers. I know all the things, but that self-knowledge gets me like nowhere time and time again. It's just, I just know. But at first it was the show. It was like just airing all that out there and for putting my parents through that. But now it is like a blessing in disguise. So I feel like a lot of those things I have moved on from.
What was the process like of improving the relationship with your parents?
Well, in treatment, I just remember I would call like them and they wouldn't really answer, and like they were very like cold, because all they were used to is, time and time again is like us calling, leaving treatment. They were just used to like, I don't know, I don't think they had like much hope in that moment. But after getting some time sober and actually calling and being like, hey, how are you? And like actually like caring about something other than like myself, I feel like our relationship started to improve and they started to trust me. And I'll never forget like going home and seeing my mom's purse left out. She didn't have to hide it. That's just like a total like, wow, that they trust me, give me their keys to the car to like, trust me to drive. And my mom's actually flew in for Thanksgiving, and I talk to my sisters all the time, and like I have a really good relationship with my parents now, but it took time because it's not like happened overnight. All they knew was how I used to be. So it definitely took time, but our relationship is really, really good now.
That's awesome. Congrats. I know it's a big deal for people because a lot of times that never gets reconciled, either the kid or the parents. It's just, there's a point of no return where it's, you know what, you did enough damage that I just don't ever speak to you again. And that becomes just a block, right? And then they never communicate, even after the person has, you know, transformed their life. You mentioned earlier in our conversation, we've touched on it a couple of times, that you still at times see yourself in a very negative light and you still have these kind of inner demons that creep up. What do you tell yourself when that kind of stuff comes up?
I'm able to like communicate, and check in with other people and ask for help, because that's one thing that was very hard for me for a long time and sometimes still is. And I sometimes have to get in a lot of pain to ask for help, but I'm able to like, just check in with people and communicate those feelings and just be able to be like, okay, like other people, I have really good people around me that are able to just check me. And like I said, when I am feeling like that, it's usually I take action and do something, hey, let me like go on a walk. Hey, let me, put my phone down and be present with my kids. Or like, hey, let me go to, a meeting. Hey, let me call another, alcoholic addict. So it's always just an action step that I do when I'm like feeling that type of way.
There's a lot of people that are struggling right now, especially, as we're recording this, we're like prime holiday season. What's your message to people that don't know where to begin as far as getting sober and they feel like they're just stuck and hopeless?
My message is that you can do it. I know how difficult it is, and just reach out to somebody else. I always like to share this part of my story that actually happened almost 5 years ago. It's like a huge thing for me. It doesn't matter like what you did, because see, people are going to hear this today and be like, okay, she was shooting heroin. I didn't do that. I'm not that bad, right? That was my mind process the first time I went to treatment. Well, almost 5 years ago, my sister-in-law, like one of my best friends, she compared herself to me and my husband, like of us in and out of jail, the constant being like sick if we didn't have it, like the stealing, the rob, all the things. She compared herself, and she couldn't identify with us because she would just drink sometimes and get blackout drunk. Well, she ended up taking her own life in a blackout, and that was almost 5 years ago. And it's because she just could not identify. She couldn't reach out and ask for help because she compared herself. It does not matter the position you're in and what you're using. Like the substance doesn't matter. It's like the reason that you're doing it and why, and the feeling. I don't know about you, but I've been in her shoes and I've been in that dark spot, and like wanting to die. Here I am, and I didn't. It's one of the most painful things to have to, deal with and experience, and it breaks my heart. It does not have to get there, reach out, ask for help. There's people that understand. There's people that just will listen, right? If you don't want it, like the solution, if you don't want like what I have, I'm here to just listen to you, because for a long time I needed somebody to hear me, Doug, and nobody was listening, and I was screaming inside and I was suffering in silence. So that is why I recover out loud. It's painful, it's miserable and it's lonely, and it just brings me back to that dark place. And like you said, it just breaks my heart that other people are out there feeling like that right now, that hopelessness. The message is that, we do recover, and it is hard and it does take work, but you're definitely capable of it. And, just reach out, tell somebody we care.
If you were to speak to yourself day one of recovery, looking back now, what would you say?
I would say it gets better, girl. It gets better, because I was like so sick and I was just ready to run and not have to want to face life, right? But I would tell myself to just hold on. It gets better. I'm telling you, I'm a different person than I was a year ago. I'm constantly trying to grow. So from 10 years ago, you know what I mean? And telling that person, that scared little girl, that like, just hold on, it gets better. And just wanting to give her a hug, actually, thinking about it.
Well, Amanda, this has been awesome. Super inspiring story. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I really think you're going to like this video as well. I'll see you there.